Great. Good evening, and thank you for joining us for this discussion of improved voter access and election security. My name is Monica Weniger, and I am the chair of the Voting Rights Advocacy Committee with the League of Women Voters of Bucks County, and I will be your moderator tonight. This is one of a series of programs developed by the League of Women Voters of Bucks County to discuss some of the issues facing voters today. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan political organization. We never support or oppose any candidates or parties, but we do take positions on issues. Our goal is to empower voters and defend democracy. We envision a democracy where every person has the desire, the right, the knowledge, and the confidence to participate. We are committed to creating and promoting a diverse and inclusive environment in our organization and in the areas in which we work. Voter security and improved voter access are on the minds of all of us as we approach the primary election on April 23rd. We're gathering tonight in the hopes of informing, inspiring, and encouraging greater participation in the process. Reaching out to a wider youth population is also a major goal of the League of Women Voters this year. Tonight, we have assembled a panel of 4 speakers who will speak on a variety of topics related to improving voter access. First, we have Representative Tim Brennan, who will speak about how to advocate and influence legislation. We have Thomas Quinn from PA Youth Vote, who will speak about ways to engage our young voters. Crystal Knight from Vote Riders, who will discuss the state of voter ID in Pennsylvania. And the League's very own Gene Weston, who will speak about the state of election security in Bucks County. At the end of the program, there'll be some time to field some questions from the audience. Our first speaker tonight is Representative Tim Brennan. Tim Brennan is a member of the Pennsylvania House of Representatives, representing District 29. He serves as the Secretary of the Ethics Committee and is a member of the Appropriations, Insurance, Labor and Industry, State Government, and Tourism and Economic and Recreational Development Committees of the House. Prior to serving in Harrisburg, he served as a Doylestown Borough Council member from 2016 until he was elected to the State House in 2022. Representative Brennan is a resident of Doylestown, where he lives with his wife, Tricia, and his baseball-loving son, Tucker. Welcome, Representative Brennan. So tell us, Representative Brennan, what advice would you give to the people watching tonight on how they can approach their legislators if they want to advocate for laws that improve voter access?
Parents, mom, pop. I'm a first generation college graduate, so I never expected to be in this position that I'm in, even as an attorney, yet alone as a legislator. So I am here as a first term legislator, just give you some of the experiences I've had. And I've worked on redistricting reform. I've was certified in law and government, so I've always taken things from a sort of government angle, concern about how governments function, the quality of representation, ability for people to representation. I was one of the attorneys that litigated in 2020 during the presidential elections. I had I had the Pennsylvania Rudy Giuliani case, which really was about protecting mail-in votes and protecting the due process rights of the folks that did vote by mail. And before this, I ran a statewide youth organization that spent a lot of time trying to get young people active, engaged, registered, and involved in the political process. I did my first at 11 years old, so I think I worked my first election at 11 years old, so I was probably a little unusual for to be involved that early. So from the day to day, what do legislators do? I mean, by and large, much of what we do is constituent service, SEPTA, PennDOT issues, state issues, working people through things. We spend a lot of time here in Harrisburg trying to get things done. But somebody asked me the other day, what's the most important thing that I've done here? And I can talk about grants and I can talk about numbers, but honestly, my answer was really about presenting to scouts and talking to young people to try and encourage them to see the political process and be interested in it. And hopefully for as long as I'm here, that's one of those main things that do influence me. We really have to care about people. We have to care about people's problems, and we want to actually serve. We have to be trustees. We have to be delegates. So as a trustee, we're here. We can't have every constituent with us, so we have to listen to what we have to hear what the district wants and be motivated by what they want to see. But we're also a delegate. I mean, we can't know everything that our constituents want, and we have to make decisions that are going to influence 13 million people. So my goal has honestly been to try and set an example for those kids and for folks about a government that is about service and not self-interest. To hope that people will be surprised with the services that they're getting. I make personal phone calls to the folks that are calling my office on the weekends, and I've had people call in and tell me about a problem on the canal, and I bike there with my wife. We've seen a lot of issues in Harrisburg with the impasse, and I've tried to make an example out of that too, and I deferred my salary for a while, so until the impasse was over, actually. So the first days that you have as a legislator, you actually become a member on December 1st of the year that you're elected. You don't have an office, you don't have staff, but you have an email to get all of the constituent concerns. So on my first day, I got something along the lines of 800 co-sponsorship memos. And even then, my focus was really on civic issues and young people. So after wading through these 800 co-sponsorship memos, my first co-sponsorship memo was a Brendan Markozik bill that would have pre-registered, that would have would pre-register young people to vote, and also encourage them to get engaged earlier with sending them information, working on classes. The dynamic in Harrisburg, a lot of people talk about the division. Even as I sit here right now, after an appropriation hearing, it's 101, 101, so it's as evenly divided as it could be. This is my, I think we're the only divided legislature in the entire country right now that has a bicameral legislature. We're the only one in the entire country. I think, part of this gridlock is much more about the institution and the conflicting institutions than it is really about partisanship. This is the first time the Democratic Party has had any real control of a legislative body for decades. So it sort of butts heads with the Republican leadership in the Senate, and it's more about those. It's more about the institutional continuity that I think that the Senate had, and the new voices that they're hearing in the other chamber, than it is about partisanship. Because frankly, I've had no problems working with folks on the other side of the aisle. I think the two bills that I had passed the House were both bipartisan, and I purposely try to seek out folks on the other side to try and work with, particularly if they're well versed on an issue. And I think it makes the law better. I think it makes the chances better in the Senate as well. I think we have a dynamic that is problematic in the country as a whole. We live in this era with amazing advances in science and technology and communications, but we're still dealing with misinformation, inequality, and real substantial threats to our future and our democracy and how we can conduct it. We're so divided into tribes, and I think many people in the public are unwilling to hear each other out. I really feel like as representatives we're doing that, but I think the public is very divided right now, and I think part of that is entertainment media. I think we've lost touch with civics. We've had this sort of atrophy of our political culture, and we're not recommitting ourselves to our democratic principles. And frankly, I honestly believe that, there's this balance in this country between rights and responsibilities and freedom and order. And unless we're going to engage in that most important responsibility, which is civics, it's going to be impossible for us to maintain the orders and rights, or the freedoms and the rights that we've always anticipated having. So, um, if we want to have those for our kids, I think we have to work hard for our democracy. And, the most basic one is civics. So it is reassuring that the League of Women Voters continue to work on these issues and flex civic muscle and try and get more folks interested and feeling that they can influence the process. So in terms of how a bill starts. I mean, it obviously all starts with an idea. I've seen bills start from a number of different, at least my experience, from a number of different ways. Um, Personal concerns could motivate a bill. Like you come into office with a number of concerns. I had a concern for animal law, and that led to one of my bills. I was a workers' comp attorney, so I did a bill for making sure people who speak other languages are getting all the notices that they should get to protect their rights. I taught an equine law class, and I knew that there was an outdated statute that should be repealed. Um, I worked on gerrymandering reform, so I worked on a school board gerrymandering bill. Um, you know, Public events could move a bill. My defibrillator bill came, 2 or 3 days after I was sworn into office, after Damar Hamlin was had a cardiac event on a national scene. So oftentimes bills are introduced in both houses, and you're working with someone from the other chamber. 2 or 3 of my bills are like that now. I have a car charging infrastructure bill, post-traumatic stress for EMS folks, are bills that are dual intro bills. Collaborations with other representatives. I have a bill addressing SLAPP suits, and to make Diwali a state holiday. I probably wasn't the best vehicle for that bill, and I reached out to one of my colleagues to work on it, and he became the voice of it, and I was very supportive. Occasionally lobbyists do create the impetus to move a bill. One of the bills that I had talked to a lobbyist about that ended up becoming something I moved on was an agriculture preservation bill. And after I was presented with the information, it sparked something from past dealings with the Bucks County organization, the Heritage Conservancy, and I realized that this is something that would really benefit a nonprofit in my district, and I worked probably with one of the most conservative members of the other party to finish that bill. Honestly, you get amazing amounts of literature sent to you in this office. I make it a point to read everything that folks send to me. Every now and then I get the stack that's this high that my wife is complaining that I have somewhere in the middle of the house, and I sit down and read it, and that occasionally leads to me moving on a piece of legislation. One of the things that I read that I totally had no knowledge of as an election attorney for probably 2 decades was that citizens born abroad will have the right to vote in a federal election, but not necessarily in a state election unless enabled. And so I introduced a bill addressing that. Reading about broadband struggles, I found a bill that would help with co-location. And another thing, frankly, that I love moving a bill when a constituent contacts the office and says that there's a concern. I had one single person contact me about a concern for having a rape kit test registry. And I researched what I could about it, and I ended up introducing a bill on it. And now it's, several members have joined it as well. Another one recently was to ban guns at the polls. I took my personal experience of having dealt with so many, having represented election boards and seeing, a wall of threats, and sort of looking at how people are far more inclined these days to listen to things that aren't real, and engage in violence, and just that we don't need guns at the polls. So I talked to the constituent about it, worked on it, and that ended up becoming a bill. So we have LPRO, which is one of our research bodies. Oftentimes, when I start looking at something, I ask for a memo on the issues, look at the issues. I talk to stakeholders. I try to reach out to the administration. We have legislative liaisons and with the administration, and that can often give us an idea if all of this work that we're about to do is going to be worthwhile, if we know that the administration is going to support it or not support it. One of the next processes we do is circulating a memo. We actually get memos sent to us. I almost never go with the memo as written. I almost always will make my own changes to the memos. I don't know what the common practice is for that, but you're looking for support and to sort of have a showing of who's interested in a particular topic. And then you'd ask for a bill to be drafted. I'm a member. I have a background in legislation drafting. That was one of my classes in law school: legislation theory, legislation drafting, with Vince Deliberato, who's the current head of the and longtime head of the Legislative Reference Bureau here, who does the drafting. So I have a bit of a background in it. Sometimes I'll get a statute and just not be satisfied with it, and I'll work on it myself. I've gotten to the point where I really do review everything now, and sometimes that's quite a bit of work. I had a bill to ban armor-piercing bullets, and we integrated a 1978 statute, and it really, frankly, wasn't what I intended or wanted, and we pulled it back from committee. And right now, I personally have researched whatever I could on federal law and other statutory definitions throughout the country to try and figure out if there's a workable standard and I've sent that back to LPRO to work together with a bunch of different stakeholders. So, and then we'd introduce a bill. The speaker assigns these bills to a committee. A lot of times that will tell how likely it is to move forward. The committee chairs will make a decision on whether something will run or not. But now we do have a discharge petition that we can use, that if 25 members of each party come together and try and pull something out of committee, we can. So that's a positive development. It will go to House consideration. First consideration, you'd blink and miss it. It's when everything's just read across the table very fast. Second consideration is probably the most interesting if you're someone who likes to watch the legislative process, and that's where amendments can be filed. A lot of times the amendments aren't necessarily to make the law better, it's to sink the bill. And then the third consideration, final consideration, would be passage. And it's then considered in the Senate, same thing: committee assignments, committee hearings, Senate consideration. It can come back to either, I can really only speak for the House. If it comes back to the House, we can either amend it, pass it, or return it to them, saying that we want the original bill, or we can send it to a conference committee, which I understand doesn't really happen anymore. I haven't seen it since I've been here.
Well, thank you, Representative Brennan. I'm just thinking, moving forward, we have people here tonight that are really interested in advocating for voter rights, and you've given us some information about the best way to proceed. You mentioned the importance of civics, misinformation. I also heard that working across the aisle is possible, despite what we've heard, and that if we are going to get some legislation passed, for instance, you had mentioned pre-registering voters or other voter access, that there is a path reaching out to your legislators. It seems like there's a process with from the memo to the bill, but I guess just thinking, moving forward with our three speakers, what type of bills, for instance, how we might be coming to you about some bills that we might be looking for voter access. For instance, our next speaker is going to be talking about the youth vote. So could we, if there's any kind of advice that you could give to people watching here tonight about how to approach their legislators. Now, if they're in the 29th, they could speak to you, but if not, they need to speak with their own legislators. Just before we go on, is there anything you could add to for our audience members? Any helpful hints that if they were going to go to either you or their own House representative to legislate for a particular bill?
Well, I mean, we're going to be most interested in the folks that are from our district. That's usually the thing that I look at most. You want to be heard, you want to be active, you want to engage your reps. Written correspondences tend to get a little more interest. I can say that, and I'm making an effort to respond to all those as well. So.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you. That's some good information there, a little inside baseball on how to influence our legislators to pass bills that could affect voter advocacy. So thank you very much, Representative Brennan. And if you could stick around, we have some Q&A at the end. So if anyone has any questions for Representative Brennan, you can put them in the Q&A section. We will ask the questions at the end of the program. But if you have any questions, you can put them in now, and we can pose them at the end. Okay. So thanks again, Representative Brennan. And now we'll go to our next speaker, who will talk to us about how to improve voter access for our young voters, Thomas Quinn from PA Youth Vote. Little bio on Thomas. Thomas Quinn founded Philly Youth Vote in 2018 and was dubbed a collaborating octopus by the Philadelphia Citizen for his work building a network of students, educators, and organizations focused on getting 8,000 public school students to the polls every election day, all while teaching full-time at Central High School. In 2020, he was awarded the President's Award by the Pennsylvania Council for Social Studies, was named a Philadelphia Integrity Icon by the Accountability Lab, and is a 2021-2022 Teach Plus Pennsylvania Policy Fellow. In 2024, he aims to build a network of educators across the state to impact the ways we teach civics to empower students in their communities. So welcome, Tom. And so tell us, what can we do to improve youth voter turnout here in Bucks County?
Thanks so much for having me. Really, I'm a League of Women Voters member in Philadelphia, so I'm really excited to be a part of this. And thank you so much. And also thanks to Representative Brennan. I learned a lot from him just now. He's a member of the PA Civics Coalition, which we're also a member of. And I know that he's been working on a bipartisan working group on civic education. So that's something I'll talk a little bit more about momentarily. But that whole process is always interesting because I teach civics. So it's like the Schoolhouse Rock video or program. I'm just a bill, and there ought to be a law. There's a lot that we can do to help youth voter access. And really, by helping youth voter access, you're helping all voter access. Because our 18-year-olds are typically not necessarily the most represented at the polls, and therefore they're not really reached out to by politicians and by political parties, which is then kind of like it's a vicious circle that exacerbates itself. So what we're doing is we're trying to work with teachers and students at the grassroots level. Sorry about my dogs here, but at the grassroots level to really make changes in the school system where young people first become eligible to vote. Because we know that if they don't register to vote at 18 and register and vote in their first election, they're more unlikely, research shows that they're more unlikely to get around to voting until they're somewhere in their late 20s on average. So it's incredibly important to do that. And as you know, there's so much important about civics education, given the current environment, distrust in government, misinformation, disinformation. So it's our responsibility as educators to make sure that, and adults in general, to make sure that young people are brought into the electoral political system. If you all don't mind, I'm going to share my screen here. And don't forget, there is a question and answer thing. So if you have questions to type in, it's down at the bottom of the screen there. And I think this will share my screen. Okay. What we're doing, like I said, is nonpartisan. We're working in the school system, mainly public schools, in low-income areas, working mostly with schools that have high proportions of Black and Latinx students, low-income students, immigrant students, because we're trying to really fill the gaps. These are the schools where the communities have been least, if you look at a map of Philadelphia, for example, you can see that the areas of the highest poverty, the highest gun violence are also the highest or the lowest areas of voter turnout. The maps match up almost identically. So there's 180 Pennsylvanians turn 18 every year. Only about 15% of 18-year-olds will register to vote on average if we don't do anything. We do know that if we are working in the schools, that we can get over 90%. When we are engaging students, we don't just stop at voter registration. It's really important to engage students in the process of registering to vote, but also figuring out what political party that aligns with your values, what issues are important to you, what positions the candidates are taking on those issues. So really helping students through that entire process is an incredibly important thing to do. And that's what civic education is all about. We work with young people at multiple levels, actually young and older people at multiple levels, but with students, teachers, which is where we got our start. I'm going to talk a little bit more detail about working with school boards and district administrators to create policies. School board counties of elections to encourage student poll worker programs and civic engagement programs. Political candidates to do interviews in high schools, let students ask the questions. And then I'm going to talk more about the state legislation and a number of bills in the state assembly. So we think that that grassroots work and as well as top down is what's going to really change the culture of voting for young people in this country. So two areas that we're focused on, and I'm going to talk more about tonight, are advocating with school boards, trying to understand that schools have to have civic education in the curriculum. They should be designated an adult, what we call a voter champion, staff member in every school to really bottom line the voter registration and civic engagement activities at the school. Empowering young people to do peer-to-peer voter engagement, making sure all this is funded, and supporting teachers against attacks or disinformation that is likely to happen, particularly in national election years. At the state level, we're also working with the PA General Assembly. We put together a policy proposal. We're encouraging, again, statewide civics curriculum, voter champions, a capstone graduation, like a senior project, and then a diploma seal, which students can earn when they graduate. We're also encouraging the state to develop or have a pre-registration to vote at 16, which Representative Brennan said was also proposed in another bill by Representative Markosek. I think there's a number of bills in the House right now that are promoting that. There's a couple really important reasons for that, which I'll talk about in a minute. But let me go back to the school board. So there's 500 school districts in the state of Pennsylvania. If you live in Pennsylvania, you live in one of those school districts. They are always interested in hearing students, parents, and community members talk to them about what is important to them. And one of the best ways that you can help young people turn out to vote is by getting your local school board interested in passing a resolution or a policy which hits on those points that I made before about civic education in the curriculum, teachers as the leads for voter registration, and having student peer-to-peer clubs or teams that register their peers to vote. We have a board policy, so that the link is down there, which I think Monica's going to share this entire presentation in the chat. And it has all these links. So all these hyperlinks are in on each one of the slides if you want to get more information. But just briefly, the process of getting a board policy passed or a resolution passed is very similar to having a legislative bill passed. And so there's it's a matter of proposing a policy, asking for a resolution. They goes into committee, the board votes on it. And once it's voted on, it gets implemented by the district administration. So I encourage you to take a look at that. So far, we've gotten 3 school districts to pass resolutions or policies in Philadelphia, Norristown, and Lower Merion. And that is having a huge impact on teachers and students' ability to civically engage folks at their schools. All right, so I want to get to legislative action. So it was interesting to hear Representative Brennan talk about LPRO and the memo process, because as a constituent in the 200th legislative district in Philadelphia, I went to my representative, Chris Rabb, and said, hey, there ought to be a law. And he helped to draft. We basically provided a legislative policy brief to him, thinking about all the things that could potentially prevent young people from registering or getting to the polls. It's a surprisingly difficult process for young people. It's something that we as adults take for granted, but young people need to be sort of guided through the steps. So we asked for pre-registration at 16. One of the other things was accepting student ID for to be able to vote. The first time you turn out to vote, you have to have an ID. So student IDs are currently accepted, but there's a number of bills in the State House that would make it required to have a government ID for all elections, which would be really particularly hard on students, young people who don't have a driver's license, particularly low-income students, as well as older people who don't have a driver's license. There's bills that would require a signature match and would disqualify voters whose signatures don't match up. But as we know, young people's signatures are probably not developed in a way that's going to be very solid. So these are all different things that we proposed and have been put into bills. There are some things that you can do. You can find who your legislators are by clicking on the PAYouth.vote/find my legislators, brings you to the Pennsylvania legislative website where you can put in your address and find your legislators. And when you do so, we ask you to contact them and ask them to support HB 1826, which is the amendments to the education law, and 1827, which are amendments to the sort of election law, pre-registration. We also think that repealing closed primaries would really help a lot of young people, because they tend to vote they tend to register as independents, and they're disenfranchised from every primary election, along with over 1 million, I think it's 1.2 million Pennsylvanians of all ages. So it's really important to that. There's a number of bills, like I mentioned, and I see Monica's coming in, so I'm pretty sure I'm running out of time here. We did include an email script, which you can access if you are interested in reaching out to your legislators. We encourage you to call them, write them, email them, tweet them, whichever it is. But there's a little script you can edit and use there. Okay. And there's a lot of more information in Voting Rights Lab, which is a link I use all the time to look at what voting rights and voter suppression bills are in the Senate. You can look up by state. It's pretty incredible. And then this is a bunch of our resources: access to PA Civics, And we have resources for a number of counties and a statewide resource kit.
Yeah, thank you, Thomas. And I just put tons of links in the chat, including you had some Bucks County youth voter resources. So I see that on the screen, the Bucks County. So we just put those links. So all those documents, your website, you have some great resources. I also saw that you had some bills there, 1826 and 1827. I also like to talk about open primaries. We just did a program on that last month. So that's even more reason to be fighting for those open primaries. So, yeah, thank you very much, Tom. That was great.
Thanks for having me.
Lots of good information. Hopefully, our participants in the audience here are able to use some of those links to get some more information. Tons of information out there. Thank you. Thank you very much, Tom.
Thanks.
Very informative. And again, if you have any questions for Tom, again, please put them in the Q&A and we can check on those questions at the end of the program. So now our next speaker, Crystal Knight from Vote Riders. And she's going to speak to us about voter ID. A little information on Crystal. In addition to being the Pennsylvania coordinator for Vote Riders, Crystal Knight serves on the executive board of the Pittsburgh chapter of the Labor Council for Latin American Advancement. She has cultivated strong community relationships, and her work has included campaigns to reclaim stolen wages, prevent the criminalization of public transit riders, stop the privatization of public water, and many actions in solidarity with workers, immigrants, and Muslim communities. The daughter of immigrant parents, Crystal Martha Knight is a queer, second-generation Mexican-American organizer born and raised in Houston, Texas. She holds a Bachelor of Arts in Sociology with a minor in Social Work from Texas A&M University, Corpus Christi. So, Crystal, just tell us about what Vote Riders does and what we could be doing here in Bucks County.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you all so much. I don't want to choose favorite partners, but truly League of Women Voters is one of my favorites. Y'all do such amazing work, and I'm so grateful to be here with you all today. I'm going to share my screen as well, and I'll share a little presentation. Let me just make sure I'm opening the right one. All right, I'm going to click on present. All right, and I'm also going to minimize this. Okay. All right, so everyone, I am here today to talk to you about voter ID in Pennsylvania. But to kind of give you a quick rundown, Vote Riders is a national, nonpartisan, nonprofit focused exclusively on voter ID education and voter ID assistance. So, just a little more background. We've been on the ground for 12 years now. When our founder, Kathleen Unger, in 2012 saw a wave of voter ID laws passing across the country. And she realized that there was this gap. Because in the civic engagement world, at the beginning of an election season, we are registering people to vote, right? That's so important. And at the end of the election cycle, we got GOTV, we got Get Out the Vote. We want people to get, like, all those folks we spent all those months and weeks getting them registered to vote. Now we need to get them to the polls. But this gap exists where if someone in a state that has a voter ID laws on the books doesn't have the proper ID that they need, even if they're registered to vote and ready to go on election day, they might be turned away because they simply lack the funds to get an ID. So we're here to fill that gap and do that work. We are fiercely nonpartisan, as I expressed earlier. We are never here to sway someone to vote for one candidate or one party over the other. We just want to make sure everybody has what they need so they can vote. And we are working across the country. Aside from Pennsylvania, we're in Florida, Texas, Wisconsin, Arizona, and North Carolina. Most recently, we added Ohio. So we are a remote organization, but we have plenty of folks, volunteers and staff to help do this work. And so why this is important, I would say, I want to set the scene with 2023. There were 38 states that had voter ID laws on the books. And as of July 2023, 8 states passed new or stricter voter ID laws that year alone, with more foreshadowed. So when I want to point out some of these numbers, 52 million plus more people live in states with voter ID laws today than when Vote Riders was founded in 2012. and 29 million plus people of voting age individuals do not have a current driver's license, which is one of the two forms of ID that is acceptable for voting in every state. So that's huge. That's a huge bit of people, right? So, and to kind of break it down, more of the importance of the work that we're doing, you can see the blue states here on this map just represent states that have voter ID laws. The yellow and orange states had either new or stricter laws passed in 2022 for the yellow and 2023 in orange. And our gray states are, thankfully, some of the states that don't have any voter ID laws on the books. But as you can see, the vast majority of the country has some sort of voter ID law that is just one more barrier in front of a voter before they have to cast their ballot. And another reason why this work is so important is because when we look at who's directly impacted by voter ID laws, we are looking at our Black and Brown, our Latina, our Native communities, our trans and non-binary communities because of name change reflected on their ID, especially people who are experiencing homelessness, food insecurity, just low income individuals in general, because an ID in Pennsylvania can cost you anywhere from $39 to $42.50. And that's a lot of money for a lot of people. And women, especially for the League of Women Voters, are impacted by these ID laws because they tend to change their names when they get married or divorced. And then it's a whole other document you need to get to prove who you are to get your ID. And again, confusion is pretty widespread. The laws can be intimidating, and ours here in Pennsylvania is particularly confusing. And again, voting ID laws can be different whether you vote by mail or in person. And again, we always like to emphasize that poll workers are regular people like you and me, that yes, they do get some form of training, but every county can do its own form of training. And people can always just kind of just mess up without no ill will, but just kind of not have all the tools at their request that they might need. So going into voter ID in Pennsylvania, this is me with some of the League of Women Voters of Westmoreland County. We were registering people to vote and getting information out there about voter ID laws. Another great league. So what are the IDs that are acceptable? So the photo IDs that you can probably already guess are your driver's license, your plain state ID, any ID from any type of U.S. government or state government, PA state government, I should say, your passport, a military ID, employee ID, and a special note is student ID. And that's a commonality between what our previous speaker talked about with voter ID. So some special notes is that in Pennsylvania, the reason why our voter ID laws can be so confusing is because it states if you're a first-time voter in your precinct, you must present ID. And so many people stop listening after you say first-time voter because they're like, oh, I voted my whole life. I don't need to worry about that. But if you move from one address to a new address, you're more likely than not going to be in a new precinct and you're going to have to present ID again. When it comes to student ID, there's a lot of confusion there because the state website itself simply just says student ID. But when you dig further into the language, it does say that high school student ID is acceptable if you're voting in person. But if a student wants to vote by mail, only student IDs from institutions of higher learning are acceptable for vote by mail. So that was confusing for us at first, to be completely transparent, because it plainly says student ID. But this is something that we want to educate, as again, what I started with at the beginning. We focus on voter ID education, and we want to get that information out to as many different students and parents so that their students are prepared to vote with whichever way they want to do, whether in person or by mail. And there are, of course, alternative non-photo IDs that are acceptable, like your voter registration card. Again, any non-photo ID from Pennsylvania or the US government, a firearm permit. But I like to especially focus on current utility bills, bank statements, or paychecks. Those are always good fallbacks. But for us, we want to get people the ID at the end of the day, because an ID, I mean, for us, it's in the name, right? We want to get you an ID so that you can cast your ballot to vote. But an ID is so much more than just a tool for voting. You need it for housing. You need it for employment. Even just to see a doctor, you have to have an ID. So we want to set up people for success, so that they don't have to worry about, if you're worried about your housing and worried about your job, voting might be the last thing on your mind. So we want to make sure people are set up to do what they need to do to take care of themselves and then ultimately vote. And just one FAQ that I think people ask a lot, that if a real ID is required, and it is not required. You do not have to have a real ID in order to vote. You can have just a plain standard driver's license or state ID to vote. So, how can vote writers help? Again, we do our voter ID education, our voter ID assistance, and we have communications and digital resources. You can go to our website, obviously, so that you can get more of a breakdown of the acceptable forms of IDs, links to the Secretary of State, and to request help actually getting your ID, and including a link to ordering our info cards, which I don't have an updated picture because these are the old cards we had, but we have these business size cards. They're now bifold, so we combine 2 cards into one that fold open into a little book, but they're available in English and Spanish, and they list all the different types of documents we can help you get, as well as listing the types of acceptable ID in Pennsylvania. And these are completely free to nonprofits, to government agencies, to like schools. We love to get them into anybody's hands, and there's no cap. You can, for example, the Pittsburgh League of Women Voters has ordered thousands of them for their get ready set vote bags that they make for students and returning citizens. So we would love to send these to anybody. If you are a member of a PTO or a church, or any other type of nonprofit organization, we would love to get you a box of these. And we also obviously provide voter ID training, whether they can be in person or definitely online as well. And we do joint outreach. We'd love to do, if you want to do a text bank or a nonpartisan text bank or nonpartisan phone bank, or a letter writing party to remind voters to go vote, that it's the primary, whatever it is that we want to engage voters with. We love to do those type of events if that's something that's up your alley. We love working with direct voter partnership, with direct voter contact organizations, specifically, especially organizations that canvass or text and phone bank folks. If they add an ID question into their script, we're able to then follow up directly with those folks who say they lack an ID with their current address on it. And we also love to mention that we have a helpline and a chat bot, which is powered by our volunteers. It's 866-ID-2-VOTE. If you call or text that, you can obviously email us, and you can chat with us on Facebook. But we also have a chat bot on our website, because we want to be as accessible as possible for those who are hearing impaired, who can't just pick up the phone and talk to us over the phone. But we have these different options for folks to contact us. And again, the bread and butter of what we do is voter ID assistance. And that means we help people apply and pay for their driver's license, their plain state ID, but also any of the underlining documents that they might need, like their birth certificate or social security card. So what we do is we have voter ID clinics at shelters, food banks, resource fairs, high schools, wherever someone would host us, we will go there. But these can also be done virtually, and since we are a remote organization, we can do that directly over the phone with folks. And we also love to do co-branded social media info. We'd love to highlight what you do and what you're doing together. And this is just some of the ways you can reach out to us. You can find us at on all of the social medias at Vote Writers. You can find us. You can email us at info@votewriters.org, but you can also email me directly at crystal@votewriters.org. And I just wanted to end by kind of emphasizing that we want to make sure people have the tools that they need so that they can vote. And one of the ways, if you're wondering, like, what can you do to help, we'd love to partner with you. Again, like, if you have an organization that you're a part of, please work with us. Order our cards, let's do some co-branded stuff. I would love to work more closely to put out information about student IDs with folks like Tom. And of course, if you're like, some of the stuff that we're looking out for, I'm the one staffer in Pennsylvania, so I'm always looking for people who are down to do this kind of work with us. You can do it in person, but like I mentioned, everything can also be done remotely. There are a lot of different voters that are probably just one ID away from not being able to cast their ballot, and we are there to help support, again, expand the electorate, right? Not narrow it. And yeah, I think that's it, because I know we'll have questions at the end, but thank y'all so much.
Well, thank you, Crystal. Thank you very much. And that was some great information. And I'm sure some of that information was very new. A lot of people don't know what all the voter ID laws are. So you're providing a very, very valuable service, and I appreciate that. And I put some of your links in the chat if anyone is interested. So thanks again, Crystal. And now our last speaker, Jean Weston. Jean is the current president of the League of Women Voters of Bucks County, and she is dedicated to the League's mission of empowering voters and defending democracy. She and her family have been residents of Bucks County for over 35 years, and she's a retired landscape architect. Today, she's going to talk to us about election security and how officials at the Bucks County Board of Elections keep our votes safe and secure. So thank you, Jean. And so what's up with voter election security here in Bucks County?
Well, elections are extremely secure in Bucks County, as they are in most of the country. Unfortunately, over the last few years, there have been a lot of misinformation and disinformation about how problematic voter security is, and I'm here today to tell you how secure it is. I'm going to start before Election Day, in fact, with voter registration, which we've just been talking about. When citizens register to vote, they must provide some form of identification, as we have just heard. It could be a partial social security number, driver's license number, or PennDOT ID card. In fact, it does not have to be a photo ID in Pennsylvania. You can use a bill or a bank statement or something like that that has your name and address on it. But you do have to prove who you are and where you live. Then the Board of Elections regularly cross-checks all registrations to ensure accurate voter rolls and to detect possible illegal voting, of which we have almost none. The voter rolls are regularly purged due to death, relocation, or inactivity. If somebody doesn't vote for 5 years over 2 presidential elections, they'll be notified by the Board of Elections that they won't be purged from the rolls. The deadline to register is 15 days before the election. That gives the Board of Elections time to get all the names into the poll books. And for this upcoming primary, that date is April 8th. Other thing that they do well before the election is ensure the security of the election equipment. All voting machines are tested at the federal and state level before they go into service at the local level. And by law, all voting machines must produce voter verifiable paper ballots, which can be audited. This form of voting is the most secure method known anywhere. All voting materials are kept in Bucks County's secure elections warehouse, which has 24-hour surveillance and a professional security personnel. And none of our voting equipment is ever connected to the internet. Bucks County alone has 306 voting precincts, and each precinct receives one e-poll book, 2 ballot scanners, and a supply of ballots specific to that precinct. The e-poll book, which is kind of like an iPad, is loaded with updated lists of the registered voters in that precinct. It's just those voters. Each of the scanners are tested by the Board of Elections before each election by running decks of sample ballots through them and verifying the results. And this happens before every election. And the ballots for each precinct are designed and barcoded to identify the precinct. The barcode isn't connected to any individual voter, but only to the precinct in which it's cast. So once all the equipment is checked out and all the materials for each precinct are locked in 306 individual cages, there are these huge cages that are transported by the Bucks County elections personnel to each precinct. Also, there's a lot of security around mail-in ballots. When a registered voter wants to vote by mail, they have to complete an application for a ballot. And again, they have to provide identifying information. But again, it can be the last 4 numbers of their social security number or things like that. The Board of Elections checks this information with voter registration rolls before a ballot is mailed out. Each mail-in ballot is sent with a yellow secrecy envelope and then an outer return envelope. The secrecy envelope has no identifiable markings. It's yellow and it's blank on the outside and it says secrecy envelope. But the return envelope for each mail-in ballot has a unique barcode. Each one is different, and it identifies the person to whom the ballot is sent. This barcode is used to confirm that the voter's ballot has been received at the Board of Elections. So they send one out with the barcode. When it comes back, the barcode is read and they know that that person has voted. Once a voter completes his ballot, he has to seal it into the yellow secrecy envelope and then seal that envelope into the return envelope. He then signs and dates the declaration on the back of the return envelope. Any ballot without the secrecy envelope or unsigned ballots are not counted. Once any completed ballot can be returned by mail in any mailbox or at one of the county's official drop boxes. And it has to be received at the Board of Elections by 8 o'clock on election day. Every drop box in the county, and there aren't that many, but each one is staffed by a Board of Elections employee when it's open, and then it's locked when it's not in use. The drop boxes are under constant video surveillance, and they are also emptied daily. So they aren't sitting around overnight with ballots in them. Voters are only allowed to return their own ballot, except for those authorized as designated agents of another voter. So as the mail-in and absentee ballots arrive at the Board of Elections, they're scanned and sorted into precincts using those barcodes on the outside of the return envelope. And they are kept unopened and sealed in a secure location at the Board of Elections until election day. Voters who return ballots without the yellow security envelope which is visible through a hole punched in the outer envelope, or if they come without the required signature. Those voters are notified by the Board of Elections, and if there's time, they can come into the board offices and correct the mistake. That's called curing ballots. So we finally come to Election Day. Starting at 7 in the morning on Election Day, county officials begin opening mail-in ballots. The outer mail-in ballot envelopes are separated from the inner yellow security envelopes. The ballots are removed and flattened and stacked by precinct and fed into the high-speed scanners. The scanned results are only accessed and disclosed after all ballots are counted and the polls have closed. Meanwhile, at the polling place, when a voter arrives, they sign in the e-poll book, confirming their registration. The voter is then given a paper ballot specific to their precinct, which they mark in ink behind a security screen. If they make a mistake on the ballot, they can request a new ballot from the judge of elections. And the old ballot is marked spoiled in big letters across the ballot and retained in a secured envelope and returned to the Board of Elections. Each completed ballot is then taken by the voter to one of the scanners and fed into the machine. Once the ballot is scanned, each ballot is dropped into a locked bag. Ballots are retained for at least 22 months after an election in case of a recount. So those paper ballots can always be reused or rescanned or recounted if there needs to be a recount. If a voter's name isn't found in the e-poll book, they can be directed to another precinct where they may vote using a provisional ballot. If the e-poll book shows that the voter applied for a mail-in ballot and the ballot has not been returned, and the voter isn't returning it himself, the voter can bring his unused mail-in ballot in and vote in a regular ballot. But if it's somehow lost in the mail someplace, the voter can vote with a provisional ballot. And then following the election, all provisional ballots are reviewed one by one, and only those that are verified are counted. So after the polls close, the judge of elections in each voting precinct prints 3 copies of the vote tapes from each scanning device. Poll watchers from each political party are allowed to observe the poll workers transfer the data from each scanner to the official canvass results. The results from each precinct are taken by the judge of elections to the Board of Elections. And a copy of the recorded totals and a vote tape from each scanner is given to the minority inspector at the polls to be kept for 1 year. Again, in the case of a recount or some question about the validity of the votes. At the Board of Elections, the polling place results start coming in after the close of polls. And all of those come from all 306 voting precincts. Also, all of the mail-in ballots, after they've been scanned, the results are tabulated and recorded. So the final results include the tallies from all the scanning devices at the polls, all the verified provisional ballots, and all mail-in absentee ballots, including overseas and military ballots. Obviously, it takes time to compile all of these, and therefore sometimes the final results may not be immediately available, especially in high turnout close races, which is what we usually have here in Pennsylvania. Following Election Day, the Board of Elections conducts a statistical analysis of a random sample of ballots of at least 2% of the ballots or 2,000 ballots, whichever is fewer. They actually pull ballots paper ballots and count them. For statewide races, they conduct risk limiting audits. If any discrepancies are found or suspected, they can always do a hand count of the voter's original paper ballot to verify the tally. So that's a lot of steps to very carefully ensure that our elections are as accurate as they possibly can be and actually reflect the will of the voters. And this is the cornerstone of our democracy. For more details about election security in Bucks County, you can come to the league website at www.lwvbucks.org. And I've also added some other links in the chat.
Thank you, Jean. And I am putting in that last link for the league. Let me just copy that. I'm just putting that in right now as you were speaking. And that's some incredible information. I don't think people realize how much work goes on behind the scenes. I mean, it's behind the scenes, and people don't realize that it's going on. And I think you did a great job of dispelling a lot of misinformation. You hear so many things out there. You know, people talk about all kinds of voter fraud, but it would seem to be very difficult considering how many procedures that they have in place to keep things safe and secure. And I'm glad to hear that the state of voter security in Bucks County is good. So kudos to the Board of Elections for being so diligent in their work. So thank you very much. And I believe I did put some those links, the one article that you referenced, I put that in there, and also the Board of Elections manual detailing all those things that you said. So again, that was our last speaker. So if you do have any questions, I see that some people have been putting some questions in the Q&A section. So at this point, we have, thank you, Connie Borchevsky, who's also on the advocacy committee. She is now going to go through some of the questions and field it out to all of our guest speakers.
Good evening. Yeah, there are several questions. First for Tom. Tom, one participant asks, I wonder how you get youth voters excited about voting. In my experience has been they've been mostly apathetic and feel that it's not important to their lives. So yeah, how do you approach that issue?
Yeah, I'm so glad you asked that. That's a really common, I think it's a misunderstanding of young people. Young people are generally not apathetic. I'm a teacher. I work with teenagers all the time, and we work with young people in our organization. They're very passionate. They really, really care about issues. They really want to see things change, and they really want to figure out how to do it. We often don't teach them how to do it. I mean, Act 35 assesses, which is it's an assessment of civic knowledge required by the state, was passed in 2018. It assesses students in civic knowledge, but it doesn't require that we actually teach civics in a way that engages students in the process of making government work for you. You know what I mean? So, you know, that's one way. I mean, our educational system, our schools, our teachers need to engage students in the civic process, not just civic knowledge, but civic action. Other issues are that candidates frequently just do not talk to young people, right? Because they're not on the voting rolls yet. They're not known as super voters yet, right? They don't have a record of voting on a regular basis, right? So, but frequently we see that if we actually do engage them, if candidates engage them, if political campaigns engage them, if teachers and schools engage them in civics, they turn out in really high numbers. In Philadelphia, we have a turnout rate of 18-year-olds that's higher than the city average.
Do you feel like the civics is being taught a lot less nowadays than usually before?
I don't really know. I mean, I don't have data, and you know, I mean, my anecdote, I've always taught civics, so I don't know if it's getting more or
It's
less.
a question though. How
Yeah.
I mean, I think that they're not learning. They seem like they don't know a lot these days. When you ask a lot of kids about government, a lot of them don't understand. They don't understand the three parts of government. So, I don't think it's if it's being taught, it's not being taught very well, is my understanding. So we need to work on that, for sure.
Yeah, I agree.
All right, thank you very much.
I think
There's also-
Representative Brennan has a comment as
Yeah,
well.
I do think that we fail to engage young people. Honestly, I don't think I think we've taken civics out of the schools, and at the same time, we've relied more on bad sources like TV for our information. And you could argue that kids and adults are having some of the same problems with understanding civics, because I mean, civics isn't getting your own opinion and having it repeated to you. Civics is taking a problem, digesting it, looking at the things you need to do, listening to other people's viewpoints, and forming opinions that benefit the whole, not just getting your way. And I think over the last 2 or 3 decades, with a TV in every household, with people more and more relying on entertainment media to function like it's meeting the responsibilities of citizenship, I think we've seen this decline. And it's not just young people. And frankly, a lot of the young people, are doing a pretty good job.
Have you, in your experience, Tim, has the school board, I know you just know about the local school board, but do you think that their reactions are positive or negative about civic instruction in the schools? There's lots of things that they have to teach, but
I-
civics has taken a bottom.
I think as a society, we've done so much to increase our productivity, to find solutions to problems, that we sort of lost track of the first lesson that I always give to my kid. I always say, Tucker, I don't care what you do, it's about how you do it. And we're doing a lot of things, and I think we put a lot of responsibilities on teachers that make it hard for them to do anything but teach to tests and not to be educators, which is a broad term. It's the idea that you have an ally in a school building that will teach you things and teach you how to be better humans. And I think we've gone pretty far from that in a very, very productive society. We don't live full lives, complete lives, in the sense of we don't take enough time for our family. We don't take enough time for our civic responsibilities, and we base our worth on our productivity, which isn't necessarily the best way to always live our lives.
We need more focus on civics. I think we can all agree on this. Okay. We have a Crystal question here. Crystal, a participant has asked that they just heard a piece on the news this evening that in states that have enacted stricter voting laws, they have a 4% decline in voter participation. So how does that impact? I mean, that doesn't sound logical to me, but Crystal, how does that work?
If I'm
If they have more laws, stricter laws, less people vote. This is something that was on the news tonight from a participant. So
I see. So yeah, if whenever states are passing their very first voter ID law, which like Ohio did in 2023, or like making them stricter, like removing like non-photo ID options or removing student ID options, that's going to result in less people voting, because they're gonna have like they're gonna have a need that's not being filled, right? Because they don't have that ID, that the state issued ID, whether it's a driver's license or just the plain state ID. So that's one of the reasons why, we exist to begin with. Like it's devastating to see that's number out there, that fewer folks are voting whenever these laws are passed. So in an ideal world, we wouldn't have voter ID laws. I would be perfectly happy to not have this job, right? And then we can just make it easier for people to vote, but that's not the state of reality right now. Just there's just so much more we can do to help people vote, rather than putting barriers in front, is what I'll just end with.
Thank you. Let's see, we have a question from another listener watcher for Representative Brennan. She says, or he or she says, please give more information regarding the legislation that you mentioned that will remove barriers to voting in local elections in Pennsylvania to the person who was not born in the United States. This was a new fact to me, and perhaps I misunderstood is what she or he has said.
So it's not necessarily, so when you're born a United States citizen, you have the right to vote in federal elections. It doesn't necessarily mean, unless enabled, if you're living abroad, when you're born a United States citizen, that you would be able to vote in a local election. And this, I have a co-sponsorship memo circulated on that, that would allow those never resided, but the family were Pennsylvania families who were living abroad, to allow the children to vote in Pennsylvania elections. They'd already be entitled to vote in a federal election, but this would be the enabling authority to allow them to vote in local elections as well.
Thank you. There's another question that talks about registration, people registering and people voting. It says, while Bucks County has a very high registration percentage of its citizens, which I think is way in the mid to high 80s, people that are eligible here in Bucks are already registered, is in my understanding. They're saying, yeah, but they don't all vote regularly. Do you have any suggestions on what can be done to reach the absent adults? And I think anybody can answer this. Just pipe up. Anything that can help us, because that's what we're trying to do, is get more people to the polls. So the people that stay home, even though they're registered, and don't show up.
I think from my perspective, it's as a teacher, it's really about providing people with the information that they need. This goes for all ages, that they need to understand who the candidates are, what they stand for, how do they relate to what I care about and what I know about. I mean, understanding the process and registering is part of that, of course. It's one of the biggest things that stops people from voting, is simply not being registered. But beyond that, you really have to kind of, there's different people running in every election. People don't know what judges do, for example. I know they're not running in this election, but people don't know what state reps do frequently. Sorry, Representative Brennan, but a lot of people don't, right? They just don't know that, like, they know what the president does, or they think they know what the president does. And they might know what the mayor does, but they frequently don't know what their legislators do, particularly at the local and state level. So a lot of education.
Well, that's what we try to do here in the league. And let me have Jean speak a little bit about our educational process, especially with Vote 411, which is what we do every election season.
Yes, the league has long been known for candidate forums and voters guides. And for years and years, our voters guides were printed in newspapers around the country. And now we have an online voters guide called Vote 411, which is like the old voters guide. It gave you a lot of information about the candidates and where you can get in touch with them and their websites and things like that, but also gives them an opportunity to answer questions posed by the league. Our biggest problem in recent years has been convincing candidates to respond. And we often get, candidates, some candidates respond, some don't. They're still listed, and we put in the voters guide that they have chosen not to respond. Candidate forums have become almost impossible. We've tried online, we've tried in person, we've tried individual interviews. It's becoming more difficult to encourage candidates, and we cannot do a one person. If one candidate decides to respond and the other one doesn't, we can't do that. We have to have candidates from at least two parties. I mean, it could be an independent and a party member or something, but anyway, it has become difficult for us to provide the information to voters that we would like to provide. Hopefully that will change over time. But I agree that lack of information is a very, very large reason that people don't vote.
Well, I think that's all the questions I had that on the list here. So, and it's getting close to 8:30. So does anybody else have any closing remarks?
I guess I just wanted to say, as to that earlier question about like how we get people to see the importance of voting. I always encounter like, oh, I don't care about politics. Politics, that's not for me. I try to remember like we should be listening to people as much as we can, asking them questions like, well, what matters to you? Like, is there something like with your family that really matters to you? Do you have any healthcare issues that are bothering you? Do you have any immigrants in your family that you're concerned about? You know, trying to break it down to what actually matters to them, and then relaying that like, well, if you want to see a change because the system in place is not what you want it to be, voting is what's going to get us to that place that you're wanting us to go to. So again, I always just say it's asking a lot of questions and listening to people, trying to be as empathetic as you can, and then connecting the dots from what's important to them back to voting.
Wonderful idea. And we try to do that all the time. And we try to contact as many people as we can in our voter registration drives and in our, tabling events. So that's our mission in life. And we thank you guys for helping us with it. Monica, do you want to take over here?
Sure. And well, thank you very much. I just want to big thanks here to Representative Brennan, Tom, Crystal, and Jean, and all my league committee members that helped us out here. Connie and Barbara, and also our other members, Barbara, Eileen, and Lydia, who are working behind the scenes. So I want to thank everyone, and lots of really good information, a lot of great places to go. And we had mentioned Vote 411, and I was going to mention that in my closing remarks as well. So the primary election is April 23rd, but this coming Friday, March 8th, Vote 411 will be open. So if you go to vote411.org, and I believe I put the link in the chat, you can see where our local candidates stand on issues. And, we've been talking about how to make voting more accessible for people, whether it's youths registering or people voting. We should be putting our effort into educating ourselves on the issues, and we really need to be calling on our candidates to provide us with that information. We have to make informed decisions, so they have to give us this information. So I would also encourage you to speak to either your incumbent legislators or people who are running, and encourage them to respond to Vote 411. So we will be presenting a few more programs, as you can see on the slide. March 19th, we're going to have a program about the Electoral College, and a State of Democracy discussion coming up on Saturday, March 23rd. We also have the date for the election and Vote 411. And again, on Vote 411, you can see where your candidates, see what candidates will be on your ballot, and also learn where they stand on the issues. You can also check your voter registration, find the location of your polling place, or apply for a mail-in ballot. And again, we have our website there. If you want to join the league, please feel free to go to that website, which I believe I put in the chat, and check out more information, and please consider joining the league. So that concludes our program for tonight. And again, thank you again for all of our speakers, and thank you, audience. You're a great audience and some great questions there. So thank you very much, and good night. See you at the polls on April 23rd. Bye-bye. Thank you.